Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and you guys know what time it is. It's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I've had a lot of people come in my comments of my training videos lately, and they're saying things like, oh, Jason's running naturally enhanced. And I think this is a good time to kind of break that down for people so that they don't make that mistake. And more importantly, they don't actually associate Alpha Destiny with a lot of very traditional powerlifting training methods. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of speechcraft, lovingly called my +5 hat of autism by many of you. And let's talk about this. And this is an important distinction to make because you never know when people are trolling sometimes if they're actually being serious, if they really and truly think that. Because you guys need to understand there's a lot of people who watch YouTube Fitness who actually aren't aware that anybody other than the people on YouTube put out any information about training. So you never actually know who actually follows different things or not. So you never know sometimes if trolls are actually really being serious or if they really are actually just joking because it's funny. And so, I'll roll with the joke a little bit because it is kind of funny. If they're doing it just as a joke, it's somewhat funny, but in a way it really isn't. Because I think it's really sad that a lot of the things that Alex does do, and he's a very much a neophyte lifter, he doesn't do real powerlifting. He doesn't train his lower body. He doesn't do any real form of deadlifting, doesn't squat, doesn't train his legs, and I mean any sort of real leg training. And as an upper body specialist, and he's adopted a few of the principles of Westside, right? And then he's incorporated some of it into his own programs over the years that he's sold. But the reality is, like what he's doing, and he always attributes Louis Simmons, Louis would shake his head at it. Now, if we were to name what I'm doing, I'm just calling it orc mode. But the truth is, the closest sort of program, which is just a template and a large number of concepts that you could even name it to, would be the West Side conjugate method, right? But I don't even follow that totally correctly. I'm doing my own system, right? I'm not even actually changing West Side because that's Louis' thing, and Louis has that down pat for his lifters. But to train West Side, you have to actually train at West Side. It's not really the same thing if you're doing it outside of his care. Let's be realistic here. But it's a good set of principles, and Louis is really kind of a mad genius. He really is. I mean, the guy's crazy, but he's brilliant at the same time. I'll give him, I'll give him that. The guy is off the wall. But I'm very, very familiar with Louis Simmons. I'm very familiar with his methods. I have watched hours and hours and hours of his lectures over the years, read everything he's probably ever written at one time or another. And it's very popular methods in powerlifting circles. However, I've adapted a lot of those amazing ideas and I've incorporated them over to myself, over to just purely raw lifting, and maybe specializing and bringing up certain other muscles and things like that with it. And that's more or less what I'm doing with my orc mode training at this point. But people need to understand these are very, very different things. And when you see something like naturally enhanced that Alpha Destiny is famous for, people do need to understand that is very different from Westside, and it's extremely different from what I do. In fact, there are things that I won't use from Westside that he incorporates from Westside, while he ignores probably 80% of the Westside methods. He completely ignores them. So it's like if he wants to give tribute to Louis Simmons or Louis Simmons' ideas, I mean, I'll give you perfect examples of where he differs completely from the guy. Westside and Louis Simmons, they live and die on box squats and good mornings. Right? I mean, you're not going to do any of their programming without doing at least 8 to 10 or more sets of box squats every single week of some type, right? Box squats. Not even back squats, but box squats. And you're going to do good mornings every single week of some type. Do you see Alex do any of that? No. And those are their bread and butter exercises. How about speed pulls? No, he doesn't do pulling from the floor really. Like Alex doesn't do any form of real full range of motion deadlift other than maybe his behind the back thing, which is again a totally oddball exercise. Those high handle trap bars, that's a partial because the handles are higher. It's a totally different exercise. He doesn't do what we would think of as any pulling from the floor. And even when he tried to get his deadlift up to 600 and he missed the 585, he didn't really do conventional deadlifting or even any of the sort of deadlifting that Westside does. And people need to keep that in mind. Like, they don't believe in partials there with super maximal weight. In other words, even if you mess with block pulls or rack pulls at Westside, in their system, you don't pull weights heavier than your deadlift max. So in other words, someone like Alex's, whose max deadlift was probably a hair over 500 back at the time, And he didn't, I've never seen evidence he ever got it higher than that because he couldn't deadlift 585 even with straps. He missed it. That you wouldn't be pulling 600 pounds on these other exercises on a rack pull. You would be pulling less than your deadlift max. They do deficit deadlifts. They do sub-maximal, like below the knee rack pulls, right? They don't do above the knee rack pulls there. They pull against bands and things. They pull against isometrics and stuff with deadlifts. They do a lot of crazy stuff like that with their system, with Louis Simmons' stuff. But he would never, ever promote these above the knee rack pulls. He would never promote 3-inch pen presses, any of this nonsense, you know, and they do, but they do partials with boards, and they do some different partial stuff like that. But no power lifter even presses off of pins the way that Alex does, because that actually, power lifters know that eventually beats your joints up. It hurts you. It injures you. They press off boards for a reason, for their partials. So he doesn't do any of the stuff that they really do other than the bands and the chains. But how many power lifters train with bands and chains? For decades, that has been a big part of conventional powerlifting training, right? It really has been. I mean, he uses a slingshot. Where does the slingshot come from? Mark Bell, over at Super Training, right? Mark Bell studied under Louis Simmons and trained at Westside for years. Trained there. So it still comes out of all that system. But then you come over to what I do. I don't do partials, right? Yes, I use bands and chains. I don't do partials. I do tons of squatting. I do all the box squats. I do the speed pulls. I'm using bands and chains for certain max effort auxiliary movements, or basically max effort exercises that I rotate through. But I don't do partials. You don't see me doing rack work. You don't see me doing, again, partials with more than my max. Do I do more than my raw maxes using bands and chains near the top? Yes, but I keep the bottom very, very heavy. I don't do stuff like try to do 250 at the bottom and 400 at the top. You guys don't see me doing more than 50 to 60 pounds difference from top to bottom. I don't do extreme amounts of accommodating resistance. Again, I do tons of leg work, tons of pulling from the floor. Every single week, I still do all the raw conventional lifts too, right? If you guys watch my training, what do I do every week? I do multiple singles on the pause bench, the back squat, and the deadlift from the floor completely raw, all meet legal versions for singles above 90% one rep max. I do multiple singles every single week in addition to all the other stuff. So yes, I am using a 4-day conjugate method style concurrent periodization. Yes, I use bands and chains, but it's not anything like what Alex is doing. And what I'm doing is closer to a more traditional powerlifting template for this stuff. I mean, it's not fully because it has my own little spin on some of it. But it's in a lot of ways, it's a much older system and already well-known type of training before Alex ever even touched a weight, before he ever started lifting. And so people really can't associate him with that. And it's really and truly unfair for people to make that link just because he messes with accommodating resistance and a few partials, that they want to then apply that to other people who have been using those principles in a more advanced manner than he does for decades. There are people who've been using those methods since he was a little baby or before he was born. Right? That's not his, guys. And he actually hasn't been messing with it that long in the grand scheme of things. Right? I was doing some of the West Side stuff and actually was training the conjugate method for a while before he even had a YouTube, right? You guys remember that? So, I mean, people need to keep that in mind. So hopefully the people who are making that trolling, they do understand it's not an accurate thing. I hope you guys are trolling. I hope it's all in good fun. But I want to clarify that just so that people understand it. And they do know that any such phrases or anyone making that implication, it really is just joking and trolling, because it really is nothing like it. The system of training I'm using is really and truly nothing like naturally enhanced, outside of the fact that bands and chains are used. And there are thousands and thousands of strength athletes. And even now at this point, NFL players and track athletes and everybody. Right? Joe DeFranco, even training his football players and sprinters and other people, uses the bands and chains. Like Alex Viada uses the bands and chains with his hybrid athletes. Like people do this stuff in all these other sports. They're mainstays in the strength and conditioning world at this point. And they really don't have anything to do with him. He just happened to using some tools that other people do, but he oftentimes uses them in ways that are not the way none of us use them. right? Using multiple types of accommodating resistance like that at the same time and creating these extreme accommodating resistance, that's actually not done even by powerlifters who mess with this stuff most of the time. So again, that just needed to be clarified, guys. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.